You ever feel like you're being tricked and played by the alcohol industry? Well, you are. And in this video, I am going to reveal 4 shocking lies that they are using to keep you addicted. These are not small white lies. These are massive deceptions that are impacting your health, your decisions, and your future. Stick around because what you learn today in this video could change the way that you see alcohol for the rest of your life. So first, a very quick introduction. My name is Leon Sylvester. I'm the founder of SoberClear.com, and we use a totally new method to help business owners and high-level professionals get control of their drinking within as little as 48 hours. I drank alcohol myself for close to a decade, but for the past 6 years, I have not touched a drop. I didn't go to AA or use willpower or anything like that. The desire simply left me. And if you want to learn a bit more about how I actually lost the desire to drink by using this new method, then click the link in the description and you can access a free video training that I don't publish anywhere else. You'll click the link, put in your name and email address, and that free video training will start playing, but that will show you this new method to get in control of your drinking quickly. So definitely click the link in the description, and if you want information on the SoberClear program, just go to SoberClear.com. So, let's first look at the sneaky slogan of drinking responsibly. The first drink responsibly campaigns appeared in the 1970s. Initially, they were promoted by well-meaning public health agencies and NGOs. Predictably, over time, the message was usurped by the alcohol industry. The industry itself is now mainly responsible for disseminating this idea in the form of slogans like "Know when to stop," responsible consumption, or enjoy responsibly, socialize safely. Now, something that's really interesting about these campaigns is how half-hearted they are. Often there's just a one-off press event with little follow-up. To even call them campaigns is too generous. Now, I was just looking at the view count of the Know When to Say When video of the official Anheuser-Busch channel. The view count was around 3,000. It makes you wonder, surely if a company of this size really wanted to get the message out there, they could just spend money advertising it. And researchers who have looked at these messages in print form have reached similar conclusions. One study looked at 1,800 advertising images for alcohol placed in magazines. They found nearly 90% of them included some kind of drink responsibly messaging. Interestingly, in 95% of these occasions, the drink responsibly message was in smaller font and less conspicuous than the main product slogan. And often the print is so tiny, you literally have to squint your eyes to make it out. This makes sure that whilst these messages are everywhere, nobody really notices them, much less takes them seriously. But even if we assume that the target audience actually noticed them, it's very difficult to see how they would know what to actually do with them. For starters, what does drink responsibly even mean? Well, it actually implies that it's possible to drink irresponsibly, sure. But other than that, how do we know when and where to actually draw the line? Well, if you ask me, for example, I'll tell you that the only way to drink responsibly is to not drink at all, not a drop. It's an irresponsible thing to do. Ask somebody else and they'll tell you that 1 drink is responsible. Somebody else might say 2 or 3. Another might say that you can have as many drinks as you want as long as you don't drive afterwards. See, the message of drinking responsibly is really so vague and ambiguous that it's not actionable. You can't possibly get anything useful out of it. And this is no coincidence. Many, if not most, public health researchers would argue that the message is intentionally ambiguous. And it needs to be ambiguous because it has to be compatible with 2 conflicting goals: ostensibly limit consumption, but really increase consumption, all while enhancing the company's corporate image so that the public then perceives them as respectable and community-minded. Listen, it's really just another advertising gimmick. Another interesting point is how these campaigns are all focused on short-term immediate outcomes, things in the here and now, most notably drunk driving, workplace safety, or loss of control. But again, this is a massive red herring. Now, I'm not going to argue that drunk driving or accidents are not very serious problems. They certainly are, and people can lose their lives to these things. But most of the societal pain of drinking plays out gradually in the long term, through long-term health problems, interpersonal conflicts, divorce, mental health deterioration, financial struggles, and the list just goes on. And all this is completely absent in drink responsibly campaigns. It's blacked out. For example, when was the last time that your favorite alcohol brand warned you about getting cancer? That even if you drink, say, 2 drinks a day, and you never have a 3rd drink in one sitting in your entire life, you are still massively raising your risk of all sorts of cancers. Well, never. The word cancer doesn't exist in their vocabulary, and we will get to this later in the video. Depression, anxiety, hypertension, divorce, joblessness, none of these words are mentioned in these campaigns. So by explicitly acknowledging an issue like drink driving, which can be easily avoided in the here and now, They are luring their consumers into a false sense of security. They give them something that they can pat themselves on the back for. Okay, if I don't get behind the steering wheel tonight, or if I don't drink to the point of passing out, I'm basically drinking responsibly. I'm doing the right thing. Alcohol Justice, a non-profit out of California, describes the drink responsibly messaging as a charade and demand that the industry completely drops it. According to their CEO, Bruce Livington, quote, "Big alcohol should stop disguising its alcohol promotion as a public service, and government should stop accepting the drink responsibly charade at face value. We are asking today for state attorney generals to investigate the alcohol industry's drink responsibly messages as misleading and deceptive advertising." And personally, I couldn't agree more. What do you think? Let us know in the comment section down below. I will respond to people on this video, so let me know in the comment section what you think of this drink responsibly nonsense. Secondly, let's look at alcohol and sports. See, one of the most ridiculous lies that the alcohol industry pushes on the public relates to sport. If you think about it for 1 minute, there are hardly any two more incompatible activities than playing sports and drinking. You have physical wellness and activity on the one hand, and one of the most harmful lifestyle habits on the other. No professional athlete, at least in any sport that requires physical exertion, will be a systematic drinker. Actually, forget about professional. Even if you play the sport as a hobby, drinking is amongst the most counterproductive things that you can do. Amongst many other effects, it will disrupt your metabolism, upset your sleep and digestion, raise your blood pressure, and make you gain more weight. You're also more likely to spend your free time on the weekends recovering from hangovers instead of outdoors, like with a ball or something like that. Along with smoking, it's one of the most surefire ways of destroying your performance and eventually making you quit sport altogether. Yet all over the world, wherever legislation permits it, we see alcohol companies pushing the sport connection really hard. In the US, this trend started with the advent of radio in the 1920s. Brewers soon started sponsoring local baseball teams in order to associate fans' loyalties with their brand. The advent of television and the ever-increasing commercialization of sports only made things worse. In the lead up to the 2022 World Cup, Al Jazeera reported that the world's leading 30 alcohol brands were spending an astonishing $760 million annually on sport sponsorships. And when the host nation Qatar banned the sale of alcoholic beverages in stadiums, the world's media stirred up an uproar. It was the top headline for days. Just for the privilege of sponsoring the NFL, Bud Light pays an eye-watering $230 million a year. Obviously, Bud Light, like all the other alcohol manufacturers, are not charities. They are spending this money in the hope of getting back more, much more. And if sports sponsorships and advertising in general was not effective, they would have stopped doing it a long time ago. Unsurprisingly, research finds that sports fans exposed to alcohol advertising will increase consumption, including binge drinking. Alarmingly, one of the population segments most vulnerable to this advertising is young people, especially minors. These are the people most likely to begin drinking as a consequence, and also to increase their consumption if they're already drinking. For example, in Australia, alcohol advertisements on TV are not permitted during the day, at times when children are most likely to be at home watching telly. The one inexplicable exception is during sporting events. Unsurprisingly, teenagers and children that are there receive about half of their total exposure to alcohol during these televised sporting events. There's similar loopholes and exceptions all around the world. One group of doctors has described the practice as, quote, grooming child drinkers. And there are increasing calls to ban alcohol and advertising in sports altogether. This is something that a handful of countries like France and Norway have already done. So now let's look at the third lie. So the previous section sets us up nicely for the alcohol industry's next big lie. Their massive deliberate push to get young people drinking, of which sports advertising is only a small part. And when I say young people, I do mean minors. If you think about it, this is where the money is. A 50-year-old drinker will only be around for a few years. Not only is he near the tail end of his lifespan, but if he's a loyal customer, then by definition, he is likely to die off far sooner anyway. Now, a teenager, on the other hand, is a potential customer for many decades to come. But alcohol makers face a big challenge when it comes to actually hooking teenagers onto this product. It's nasty. If you think of the first time you tried alcohol, you probably spat it out in disgust and felt like being sick. Well, this was your body's natural reaction to a poisonous substance like ethanol. Eject it as soon as possible and leave you with such a bitter memory that you will never want to go near that stuff again. Now, up until the early 1980s, the only booze that you could buy was basically beer, wine, and spirits. All three of these categories of drinks were completely unpalatable to the untrained drinker. But then the alcohol industry started introducing a whole new line of alcoholic products. These blended the distinctions between these three categories, as well as with non-alcoholic soft drinks. They were sweetened, low-strength alcoholic drinks that masked the flavour and aroma of the ethanol. Their purpose was to pave the way to alcoholic beverages for the younger generation. It was the industry's solution to the problem of getting younger people to swallow their product without puking it back out. The first of these so-called flavoured alcoholic beverages were the wine coolers, which hit the US market in 1981. By the late 1980s, their sales had peaked at over $1 billion annually. In the 1990s, wine coolers gave way to the infamous alcopops, and eventually, at the turn of the century, to so-called flavoured malt beverages. Alcohol manufacturers often name these products after their heavier spirit brands. So you have, for example, Smirnoff Ice or Bacardi Breezer. These names serve to raise brand awareness among young consumers, and you can see how it would smoothly prepare their transition to heavier spirits. Now, alcohol manufacturers don't deny that these heavily flavoured and sweetened concoctions are marketed towards younger drinkers. They are quite open about this. But then what they do is hide behind the excuse that they condemn underage drinking, and that the intended audience is, quote, entry-level drinkers of a legal age. In most European countries, the minimum age to purchase alcohol is 18, but in the United States, it is 21. But these numbers only refer to how old you must be in order to actually purchase alcohol, not necessarily drink it. In most jurisdictions, drinking among minors in a private setting is either completely legal or the laws are simply not enforced. And it's very easy for minors to bypass the restrictions on purchasing alcohol altogether. As a result, a sizable percentage of all these drinks end up being consumed by minors. The figures we get from research studies are truly horrifying. In the US, for example, already in the 1990s, research found that school students drank up to 35% of all wine coolers sold. A similar picture quickly emerged in Europe. In the early 2000s, around 40% of 14 and 15-year-olds were consuming these beverages on a weekly basis, while the German government reported that 50% of them were being purchased by teenagers. And make no mistake, these huge figures don't happen just by accident. Everything about these beverages is designed to target minors. The taste, the colour, the packaging, the branding, the alcohol content, everything. And tragically, the result has been that the age of initiation into drinking has steadily declined over the last few decades. In the US, it went from 17.6 years in 1965 to 15.9 years in 1999. That's almost 2 full years, corresponding to an untold number of accidents, violent deaths, unwanted pregnancies, incarcerations, what have you. Out of all the lies and dirty tricks of the alcohol industry that we are covering in today's video and throughout the years on this channel, this is truly one of the most despicable ones. And number 4, let's look at the sneakiest trick of all. See, another sinister trick of the alcohol industry is how masterfully they've downplayed the health effects of alcohol. Now, we did touch on this earlier when we were discussing drink responsibly slogans, but this is a really large topic and deserves separate treatment. To realize just how successful they've been, all you have to do is compare alcohol to tobacco. Nowadays, it's quite hard to even see the labeling on a pack of cigarettes. It's mostly covered up by huge warnings with very graphic images of tumours and so on. See, the public became so sensitized to the health effects of tobacco that governments all across the world instituted sweeping smoking bans. Smokers were simply banished to smoke outdoors in the rain and freezing temperatures, and even stigmatized. But when it comes to drinking, the silence is deafening, and so is the public's ignorance. There have been no health awareness campaigns or any other meaningful measures used to tackle this problem. On bottles or cans of booze, there are still no health warnings whatsoever, not a single word. Not only that, but alcohol advertising is still allowed on TV and radio, generally without the obligation to carry any health warnings whatsoever. We only get that drink responsibly mantra. Predictably, the public is in the dark. And if you really want to see how successful Big Alcohol has been at covering this up, I invite you to randomly pick a friend of yours and ask them to actually list the negative health effects of drinking. For most of the population, they are most likely to just label one: liver damage. And if you press them, they'll probably add a few less benign things like weight gain and hangovers. But as we know, alcohol attacks more or less every organ and system in the body. Its list of toxicities are truly endless. And let's just focus on one specific example here: cancer. Alcohol is a proven cancer-causing agent, carcinogen being the scientific term. It's classed as a Category 1 carcinogen, alongside other proven ones like ionizing radiation, tobacco smoke, and asbestos. Heavy drinkers have a 5-fold higher risk of developing mouth cancer compared to non-drinkers, as well as a 2.6-fold higher risk of larynx cancer. They also have a 5-fold higher risk of esophageal cancer, a 2-fold higher risk for liver cancer, and 50% higher risk of colorectal cancer. Women who drink heavily also have a 60% higher risk of developing what is by far the most common type of cancer in women: breast cancer. None of this is in question. You can find this information on the website of the National Cancer Institute, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the CDC, and so on. What is really astonishing is how well this has been hidden from the public. The same public that has been bombarded for decades with highly questionable research on the supposed heart protective benefits of red wine. Research, in quotation marks if you will, that is highly contested and even if you take it at face value has tiny effect sizes. While at the same time you have indisputable evidence of alcohol killing off countless people annually through all sorts of cancers. And the public is blissfully ignorant. Let me give you an example from my own country, the UK. In 2015, a team of researchers there surveyed a sample of 2,100 adults. In the first part of the survey, they were given the task of spontaneously naming any health conditions that heavy drinking can cause. Only 12.9% of participants spontaneously named cancer as one of their health conditions. In the next part of the survey, participants were given a list of 7 conditions and asked to pick those that could be caused by drinking too much. Those conditions were cancer, heart disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, liver disease, being overweight or obese, and arthritis. In case you're wondering, drinking is linked to all of these except arthritis. Now, even when explicitly presented with cancer, less than 50% of participants agreed that it can cause cancer, 46.9% to be precise. Another 20% said they didn't know, and 24% flat out said no. This is not a coincidence. I bet if you asked the exact same sample whether red wine is good for your heart, over 90% of them would probably agree. No coincidence again. These public perceptions don't just materialize by accident. It doesn't just happen that the public knows certain things, even if they're completely wrong, and ignore others. This is the result of massive expenditures of money in the form of carefully thought out public relations, lobbying, misleading advertising, social media marketing, and so on. A recent research report identified 3 main strategies the industry uses to deceive the public about this. Firstly, denying or disputing the evidence, essentially outright lying. Second, distorting the evidence. They do this by acknowledging that there is a risk, but misrepresenting its nature or size. They'll say, for example, that the risk only increases with heavy drinking, which we know today is not true for certain cancers. Or they'll say that because we don't know the actual mechanism by which alcohol causes cancer, we can't say for sure that there's a causal relationship. Thirdly, they'll distract the audience by focusing the discussion away from alcohol. So they'll talk about how cancer is a multifactorial disease, the results of various variables like age, genetics, the environment, and so on. Or they'll talk about the fact that there are hundreds of cancer-causing agents that have been discovered, and alcohol is only one of them, another industry red herring. Of course, cancer is a complicated condition and there's lots of factors in play, but that doesn't mean people should expose themselves to a known carcinogen that independently increases their risk. I mean, that's common sense, right? Anyway, if you click the video on the screen right now, you can learn 3 secrets to getting in control of your drinking.